consumption, you spoke about how Veblen's relativity of wants, and then you kind of juxtapose this with Adam Smith's willingness to postpone consumption for the future.
Yeah.
There's an example that came to mind of the Birkin bag. I'm unsure if you're aware. It's a symbol. It's like an icon in higher class societies, celebrities. To purchase this bag, it can go to tens of thousands to hundreds of pounds. But it is an amalgamation of status and wealth which secures someone this bag, and the actual company restricts production of these bags, so maybe only 4 or 5 get made a year, so it doesn't matter about wealth, it also matters about power to secure a bag. I don't know if this would actually come into conspicuous consumption because only the very wealthy could recognise one because they're so rare, or if this would come into Adam Smith's postponing consumption.
Well, it's certainly it's not an example of natural scarcity. It's artificially created scarcity. An economist would say it's bound to be undermined by the market, because the market can make something, can produce something that looks exactly the same, but costs 1/1000th of the price. So it's very, very hard to maintain recognition that you are you possess something of extreme scarcity. In other words, the number, there's been a restriction. The market tends to reduce the amount of scarcity of this kind. For example, at one time, it was obviously a status symbol as well as a useful thing to have a watch. And you can still today buy watches, with brands of watches that cost $50,000 each. But they don't do any better job than a watch that costs £1. So the market has reduced the premium, if you like, but on the other hand, what it's done is create masses of bling stuff, which isn't actually isn't that costly, but enables the battle for relative recognition to take place at a much lower level of income than was possible in the past.
And would you say that makes conspicuous consumption more important or less important as an economic force?
What do you think?
Well, that's not a very fair way to respond to that.
No, but I mean, this is all open discussion. Every society will have a way of will be able to invent its own forms of conspicuous consumption, things that make other people jealous. Nowadays, to have a very expensive watch doesn't perhaps make anyone jealous and feel, oh, I've got to have a watch like that. For example, cars, you still have conspicuous consumption in motor cars. The difference in price is absolutely gigantic. And what is it that someone is buying when they buy a car that costs $100,000 or $200,000 or £500,000 or dollars? What is it that they're buying? They're buying recognition that they can afford that kind of car. It's not that the performance is 500 or 1,000 times greater than that of a cheaper car. That isn't it? It's just that they're known to possess this wonderful Lamborghini or whatever it might be, and their pocketbooks are deep enough to afford it. What the market does is both it brings the competition for positional goods more and more within the reach it brings it within the reach of more and more people, but at the same time it creates more and more positional goods to compete over. I think the main conclusion of the positional goods argument is that we cannot ever satisfy trade can never satisfy what we want, because there are always going to be some things that not everyone can enjoy. So, how can you limit the competition for conspicuous consumption? Well, I mean, you could equalize income so that no one can sort of consume more conspicuously than anyone else. And that was roughly the case in the Soviet Union. I mean, it wasn't completely the case, and they just built, everyone had the same flat. I mean, they didn't, no one could have a flat with one extra room, unless they were a high official. Yeah.
I had a question. Do you think that conspicuous consumption is responsible for the high value assigned to the part of the production process involved in advertising and marketing and branding that's present in post-industrial society, where sort of money for manufacturing has relatively, the value added in the manufacturing process has gone down, and now all the high value added processes like marketing are now present in the West?
Yeah, well, it is. Yes, absolutely. I mean, it is. I mean, capitalism is an economic system which exists to create dissatisfaction with what you've got. And part of the creation of dissatisfaction is through advertising. Advertising is designed, it's an organized form of creating dissatisfaction. It's not that it creates satisfaction, because you're never don't get much satisfaction from buying the products that the advertisers so enticingly present for you. You get the satisfaction at the moment of purchase. I mean, what is the satisfaction? On the one hand, you get this, you may actually expect more than it delivers. That, in which case you're myopic, and you should learn. I mean, if that was the only, if delusion about the happiness or pleasure that purchases will give you was the only thing at work, then you might expect a reformation to take the form of more accurate knowledge and better information and so on. But if, on the other hand, one of the objects of the purchase is to be able to say to someone, look, I've got this and you haven't, then it's not myopia. That's a sort of something that is part of your utility, to be able to actually make that kind of claim. So I think all those arguments which rely on better information to bring outcomes more in closer relationship to expectations have this weakness at their heart, that they ignore the fact that you're buying something to impress someone else. And as long as they're impressed, there's no information can really make any difference.